What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Existential Stoic Podcast, episode 39. Today's episode, When is Enough? I'm Randy. I'm here with my buddy Danny. What's up, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
So, this is an idea that I had this week. When is enough? Because sometimes it's hard to find out when it is enough.
Yeah, it sounds. I think it's a good topic because it's like almost everything we do. It's hard to tell, like when have we done enough? When have we reached our goal? When have we, it's like I feel that way all the time. Like even if you're trying to evaluate really anything in your life, right? When have I hit that bar or that line that says like, yeah, I've done this or I'm doing this or I'm good at this? Like how do we make that determination?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like it's I was thinking about it specifically because I remember back it was probably around 2006 and I had wasted the whole entire year playing World of Warcraft and didn't actually do anything worthwhile with my life. And
Some wouldn't
but
call
the
that a waste. It depends on how you look at it.
yeah, I loved it. It was great. But like it was I had accumulated so much money in World of Warcraft and yet I didn't know anything about money in real life. And I was like, why am I wasting all this time making all because I was making a killing in World of Warcraft. And I was like, why don't I actually make money in real life? And so now I've gotten to a point where, I'm not like set for life yet, but I'm doing pretty well financially. And but the thing is now all those habits that I have that build wealth, I can't turn them off. So like can't relax, can't take a day off, can't not produce more like all this stuff that I had to do to be able to build the finances. Now it's hard to turn off because I don't want to lose the momentum. And also I don't know when is enough. So that's
Yeah.
why the episode today.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point. It's funny because like you build all these habits and all these routines that are help, because the fact is like, unless you're born with a trust fund, it takes a lot of work and effort, right? And you want it to pay off, and it's great when it does. But there's also the side of like, you want to live life too, because like you said, like if you just played World of Warcraft for a whole year, you did really well in it, right? But you weren't doing anything else. And it's like, so then you refocus on doing something else, which is going well. But if you're not giving yourself a time to also do things that you want to do, right? Is it overdoing it? It's like, is there a switch that we can turn to kind of do something else? And I get the fear too of losing momentum, because I think that is a real worry, right? If you stop, I think that's, it's funny. I've talked to a lot of people I remember that like, going into retirement too and stuff that like fear that, like the stopping, right? That like, if I stop, I'll die, basically, because there's nothing else. What else do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how you answering this question is hard though. When is enough? Because, what metrics are we using? I think we often look to like, most of us probably look to like financial stuff as a marker for that, right? But the problem with that is then there's never enough, because there's always people with more. There's always a way to gain more or do more. I think there's one of the difficulties is a lot of the metrics we use that are external, you can always add to it.
Yeah, it's really interesting with the money because you you think that like once you have a certain amount of money, then you'll be whatever. But really it's more of like a relationship with money. Like I as soon as I actually started budgeting money, I felt that I had enough money. Because up until that point, I felt like I never had enough money because it was always like, where's it? It's always running out. But then once
Yeah.
I budgeted, I knew that I was always going to be making more than spending. And at that point, I was like, okay, fine. Now I have, I may not be, I was living super cheap. I was making myself lunch every day. I wasn't living a lavish lifestyle, but it was like my relationship with money had changed. Um, and so now it's kind of like, okay, I'm still doing the same thing, still living rather inexpensively, but it's like, when does it stop?
When is the line?
Like
Where is
for
the line?
instance, for
When
instance,
have I crossed it?
right.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
For, so I'm I'm doing a whole bunch of different stuff right now, and so like there was a point this week where I was completely overwhelmed, and I was trying to do so many different things. So I sat down and I wrote down all the different things that I was doing, and like the bare minimum for a day, in order for me to do the bare minimum of what I considered acceptable, was about 10 hours worth of work in a single day. And this was
Which
weekends
is
as well.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like the bare minimum. That was like for me to consider the day acceptable, I had to do put in 10 hours. And if I wanted to actually do more of the stuff like towards more of the fun or the enjoyment, it would be like a 16-hour day and I was just completely exhausted.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was actually struggling with that this week because I was working on a couple different projects, and I had mentioned to you I started with the I wanted to start with the computer stuff again, so I started working on that again, which is it's fun, but it takes because like so this is just a side story, I guess, but I did install the virtual machines and like but I was like, I was like, shit, I got to refresh on Python because I don't know it that well. I only know some of it, and I really wanted to know more of it. So I was like, let me do that. But then I was also doing work, and I had this other project that I'm still working on, and I have like life responsibilities, like the dog and like relationship and stuff, and like it happened to me this week where I had basically like basically a breakdown one day because I was just like too overwhelmed. I was like, and I looked at it and I was like, and it's funny because you put this pressure on yourself to do these things that are like, like learning software or something. It's good. It's a good thing to do. But at the same time, it's like, I know if I don't pressure myself, I won't do it. But at the same time, when I pressure myself to do it, I'm trying to build it into every day. And then I stress myself out. And I get it. It's a difficult question. How do we, in other words, I guess effectively we're asking, how do we balance our lives?
Yeah, it's a tightrope.
Yeah.
And so like I got to this point because there's all these things that I realized that if I don't do them every like I kind of am getting to the age where I kind of am starting to understand myself. Like I don't completely know myself, but I'm
Yeah.
kind of starting to get to see my patterns. And like I know for myself, if I don't do something every day, I'm just not going to keep up the habit. Because I can be like, if if I did it, did I do it today? Yes or no? Okay, if I didn't do it, I can do it. If I did it, I'm good. And so like that's a very easy way for me to maintain habits. But for things that I only do sporadically, unless I automate it somehow, I just will not keep up with it because it's not something that's there to do.
Well, and I think it's like, you're busy too, though. I think a lot of people, it's like when you're busy and you're doing a lot of things in life, right? You're trying to incorporate these other things that you want to do. And it's like, so it sounds like unless you force it into your routine, like everything else, but then you're just piling on stuff to the point where it's probably the enjoyable stuff isn't even really enjoyable. It's becoming
Mm-hmm.
just another task that you have
Yeah.
to accomplish. And I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can. It's a tough one though. When is enough?
Well,
Because it's like
so
I was thinking about this the other day. Like, what if you? Because I this was one thing I was at least thinking about was you know instead of taking that day by day look, stretching that out to like a week or something, or maybe 2 weeks, so I can incorporate things in, trying to expand my routine out so that instead of doing things every day, I can do them, say every third day, do this for 2 hours or something like that, and try and do that and see if it works. But you run into that same problem of, I'm afraid I'm not going to do it.
and so that's another thing that I've been struggling with is the patience. So like
Oh God, yeah,
yeah, because I know for a fact that if I do something long enough, I'm going to learn it. And all I need to do is a little bit. Like I'm always reminded of Will Smith's story about how his dad uh, knocked down a brick wall, and he told Will and his brother, he's like, "You have to build that wall," and they're like, "It's impossible," and he said, "You have to do it anyways." So they just placed one brick after another brick, and after like an entire summer or a year or whatever it was, eventually they built the wall, and they saw it's not impossible. It's just like little step by little step by little step. But it's so hard to like when you're putting in those little steps and you're not seeing the results immediately. It's so hard.
well, I think that's why it's like, I think it's very, when you have that mindset, it's very easy to start stuff, because you know, like, oh yeah, I can learn this, but it's also really easy to also stop because of that same reason, right? Like, I think that's why a lot of people struggle with that, where you start a bunch of different little things but never really follow through because it's fun to start, it's enjoyable, it's exciting, but you always hit that point where you're just like, ugh, this is still going. I know I have to put in like realistically most things like it's going to take you at least probably a few months, if not a year or more, to get
I was
really
gonna say 10
decent at.
years.
Yeah, yeah. I was trying to be more optimistic, I guess, but but that's just it, right? I mean, that's the problem. We start doing it and we expect this, and it's like you put a month in, and you're like, damn it, why am I not better? Or you hit those plateaus, and it just sucks. And I think it's an important question, when is enough? Because are we talking about? I guess that's the other thing. What do we, if we're talking about in life, is this more an issue of balance? Is it finding time to do things that you want, or is it an issue of stopping? Because is enough the line where you say I don't need to do any excess any more than this? Is that what we're saying, or is it? Do you know what I mean? Like, I guess.
Yeah. So for me specifically, this example was like the in the financial realm, because I know I can't not work forever, but if I was to stop for like a couple weeks, I would be fine. And it would be, but like the thing is, it's just like a sheer wall of terror about losing momentum. I'm like, if I stop for one day, I'm done. And it's just this like, so like here I am completely burnt out. Like yesterday I just slept for like 6 hours straight during the day. And and I'm like,
That's all. It's funny
I'm
too.
like,
It
is
like
it
always
enough?
feels. Yeah, it always feels good, but it's always like a terrible thing when you wake up. You're like, "Fuck! I just wasted fucking a whole." Dude, when I got stressed out the other day, that's what I did. I took a nap because I
Mhm.
was like, you know what? I'm just um
Yeah.
stretched too. I mean, there's too much going on, and I'm trying to. But I think that's our dissatisfaction too, right? You want things to be better, and you want to get to a point where, like, I think everybody wants to be a point, like, financially, where they can say that they're comfortable, they know that they're safe for a while. But the issue is you never know the future either. So there's always that fear that if you keep building more, you protect yourself further, right? It's like you're adding another layer of protection to it or whatever, and so you can get
Mhm.
through that. Yes, I think there is that concern that like, does it ever stop, or is there ever enough? And maybe if there's not, or if there's no way to turn that off, is it more about then finding balance so that you're not killing yourself? Because you're right. I think if you're stressed out to the max all the time, or if you're burnout, or if you're beating yourself up because you're not doing these things that you're setting for yourself, something's probably off, right? You're either being impatient, or you don't have the balance, or like something, right? I think that's got to be the case.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when is enough?
When is
What
enough?
would
Jesus.
the Stoics say? What would the existentialists say?
I know that's the difficult thing, right? Because I think they wouldn't necessarily look at these externals as, I think it's more
I would
about doing
almost
what's right for you, rather than, what were you going to say? Sorry.
I would say that the Stoics would say it's never enough. They Because you can never fully uh be a virtue. So
Oh, in the
like it's
sense of,
never
like, yeah, yeah,
it's
character
never
and like
enough.
ideas.
Yeah.
Well, they still thought, though, like, they still thought the flourishing life was possible, right? Eudaimonia was something that we should all strive for.
Mm.
So I think too, it's more about, like, I think in both cases, really, it's about living a life, being a good person is the focus, right? So those other things in life that we can do, like, doing well on a job or starting something new, those are great because they add to the community, or they add value to your life, maybe, or they add means to do things that you can use to help you, right? Be a good person. But I think for them, I think it would be, being that good person and putting our efforts into that. But that still is hard, right? It still takes effort. And you're right. I don't know that there is, in the sense of like that personal development, there is never enough. You can do it. It's an indefinite process, right? Because it's an ideal. You could always
Mm.
theoretically be better, and you always need to be that good person the next day. So
So I was thinking of this other example because like I'm asking when is enough when I'm exhausted.
mm,
Whereas like I remember when I was a kid and we grew up in Jersey, which is the blueberry capital of the world. So
oh
like
yeah,
you go blueberry picking, and when you're a kid, you eat blueberries when you're out there picking, and you know
faster
when
than
you've
you can
eaten
pick
enough.
'em.
Like
Yeah.
you know when it's enough. So maybe I'm looking at it and maybe I'm saying maybe it's not enough because clearly I knew when I was eating blueberries when I had eaten enough. Actually, I knew when I ate too much, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So like so but
That's
the
a good
thing is like
example.
yeah. So like I'm not at a point now where I know for a fact that it's enough. I can say that with certainty. Um and so
Well, I
perhaps
think too.
I
Oh,
perhaps I need to
good.
continue doing it. Maybe maybe not go as full throttle, but continue doing it until I do know that it's enough.
I think that that makes sense, right? Because it might never be enough. Literally, I mean, you might just be like, I think, but what you said there was important because I think that's true for a lot of people, right? It's when we're exhausted that we feel this the most because it's like those are the moments where you have that anxiety or you have that stress because you're also worn out physically and mentally. And when you are, I mean, everyone sees that, right? As soon as I just that happened to me this week, when my mental capacities were drained, right? And as soon as that happens, it's like everything becomes way more difficult. Patience, right? Thinking clearly, planning, all of that becomes a challenge. And even like things that I know I can do seem way harder. And I think that's the difficulty too, is maybe it's in those moments giving yourself a chance to recuperate, then taking a nap, giving yourself a day off, not saying that you're going to stop or not saying that you're not going to do the things you need to do, but saying to yourself, like, all right, I still need to make this content today. So I'm going to do that now. And then the rest of the day, I'm done. I'm taking a break and giving myself a chance to actually relax and maybe look at it more instead of like when is enough in terms of like life, like the broad picture. Look at it like when is it enough now? When have I sort of maybe pushed myself too far where doing more is just going to make things not actually progress in the right way or worse? Because it's funny because it is like this, it's also like this weird line because like there's times when I'm doing stuff like I was working on something the other day and I really got into it and I ended up working till 1 o'clock at night and I had started work at 8 in the morning. So I mean I had worked effectively all day. Granted, now I have the dog and stuff, so I had taken breaks because I had taken 2 walks with the dog and things like that. So it wasn't like I had worked straight through, but I had definitely put in at least 10 hours, right? And it's like, but I didn't feel exhausted by it. I stopped because it was so late. I was like, I should go to bed, and like I could have kept going. And I think that's one of the things too, though. I knew if I kept going, it's like I would have burned myself out that night. The next day would have been effectively worthless. And it's like, am I going to get that much more done now to where that's worthwhile? Maybe that's a way to look at it, like balancing instead of looking long term, looking like now in the short term in the moment of what we're doing.
Mm, yeah, definitely. So what you were saying there, and one thing that I was starting to do that was helpful was recognizing enough now. So one of the things that I was starting to do was being peaceful today and content today and satisfied today, because those are things that are in my control. Whereas having enough for to get me through forever, who knows, you know? But being peaceful and content and satisfied, those I can do.
Well, I think the other thing too, like what you said there too about like having enough forever, like we literally don't know what's going to happen, right? I mean, you could acquire all this wealth and the financial system could collapse. Not saying it's going to, but it could, right? I mean, like these things could happen, and I think what you do though in having your routines and doing those things is you also prepare yourself in a way that you have all these skills, you have all these abilities, you have this work ethic that will be with you no matter what, right? No matter what happens, that can be sort of retooled for a different purpose because it's yours. That's in a very simple way of saying that's in your control, right? That's the stuff that you possess. And I think in that sense, I think, probably existentialists and Stoics would agree that, working on yourself in that way, that is crucial. And that in the certain sense, you always are building something positive because you never lose that. That can't be taken away. It can't be lost because of something happening in the world. The other things can, right? And so, and there's also, I think, more of a natural sense of when like, maybe this will sound weird, but like, if you're trying to learn something new, there's a natural sense. We know when we possess the skill, right? Like if I'm trying to learn, I don't know, like either program or even like, carpentry or something, there's a sense where I know I have the relevant skills to do this now. But when we're talking about like acquiring things or like accumulating stuff in life, like wealth and things like that, there is no real limit to that, I don't think. You can always have more. It's always theory. You could have enough to live for 2 weeks, or you could have enough to live for 6 months or 20 years. I mean, you can always add to that, right? And I think that's one of the issues too in thinking about enough, is that maybe there is no line looking at our whole lives.
That's a good point. I never really looked at it that way because, it's kind of like, I play this little racing game, and you can only fill up your gas tank so much. Like there's 8 bars that it could be full. Whereas with money, there's literally no end to it. So like
Yeah.
it can be empty, but the top, there's literally no end. So that I never really looked at it that way. That makes it a lot more difficult. Because with like the gas bars, I know when is enough. When I get enough, then I'm good. But
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
geez, yeah.
Well, it's funny. I think Aristotle said that in a sense about like, like even like, if you look for like, if you're looking for like honor or like fame, right? There's no limit on that either, right? It's in the world's control, but there's also no limit on those things because you can always be more popular. You could always have more followers. You could always have, and I think these are kind of things that are difficult because if we focus on those, there's literally no limit. For yourself, there is sort of a limit to what is that you'll know when you have it, right? You know when you have those skills, you know when you're happy, you know when you're working on yourself and you're a good person. I think maybe that is the correct way maybe to look at it. Like there's a natural sort of, yeah, like a gas tank sort of. That makes sense. Yeah, I
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, so when is enough?
But we all
I guess
struggle with
that's
it. It's funny.
yeah, yeah. It's just because I also like calculated, when will what's the number that I'll actually know that is enough? Like I took a salary and I was like, if I make that off of passive income every year, then that'll be enough. But it's like, okay, so I'm not there yet. But uh,
Yeah, but even that, I mean, like, I don't know, it's like funny to say that too, though, because like, yeah, I mean, theoretically, maybe if you hit that salary with passive income and you were making that, and that's great, you would stop doing other stuff and start. But would you really? I mean, that's the other issue, right? It's like, would you stop? And I think that's part of the problem is like for a lot of us, I'm not saying like, I think there's a lot of jobs that people have that they would absolutely stop if they could. And, because they're not like, they don't promote their like well-being or like their any sort of skills or anything like that. But if you're doing stuff that's like kind of for you, I think, would you really stop? I wouldn't want to stop necessarily. I think that's probably a
mm,
bad thing looking long term because it's like almost like what's the point of living if not acting in the world and doing things?
yeah, yeah, that's a good point. There was a time when I just like stopped working for a while, and after like a month, it got really boring. And yeah, yeah. But one of the things that I did that was actually helpful. So like when I was really overwhelmed, and I wrote down all the stuff that I was doing and how much time I was spending every day doing all of it. Um, I played like a little mind game. I was like, if I was in some type of situation where I could only do one of these, like let's say I was, in an accident or something, and I was only allowed to do one thing a day, which thing would it be? And that was really tough. And then I was like, if I could only do 3 things a day, which would that be? And that was still really, really tough. But it really helped focus what my priorities were so that now I know like the 3 things that I have, that takes me somewhere 5 to 6 hours to do in a day. And so like if I get that done, and I intentionally have to congratulate myself when I do that. If I get that done, then it's a good day. You know, if I don't get that done, it's still a good day. But like if I get that done, I've been effective that day. And so,
I get
and then
that feeling though, right?
everything else
Yeah,
is, sugar on cherry on top, whatever.
how you might say, yeah,
Yeah,
whipped cream and cherry on top or something.
there we go.
Yeah, I get that feeling though too, because that idea of like, like it is. I guess it's weird in a way, but looking at your day like that was a good day because I got all these things accomplished that I wanted to do. It is a good feeling though. It feels great when you like see your productivity and see that you're making those steps towards something because it's going to, like, especially when you're starting something new, it's going to take a while to get there, but to see that progress during the day, even if it's just the time put in, feels great because at least, hey, I'm building towards that, and it's a good thing to do. It's funny too because I struggle with that too because I think like a lot of times like that prioritization and planning is so important because that's one of the things where I think I'm still struggling with where I'll get distracted or get you know focus on something else or focus on something for too long, and then I get mad at myself because I didn't do other things that I thought were important that day, or I didn't get to accomplish other things that I thought were relevant. And so you're right, I think that's a good way to do it, is congratulating yourself for getting what you wanted to done, or at least having an idea of like these two or three things are crucial, they have to get done, and
Yeah.
anything else is a bonus.
Hmm. Yeah, the congratulation for me is something that I notice is very important because I'm very like, I'm like, well, I got that done and it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now I got to do the rest. It's like,
Not giving
I,
yourself a chance to like really like, yeah,
I just go full like meth head about it or something like just got to do it.
next project, hurry up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny, it's like, well, it's like that. It's like the congratulations, I think, is sort of like a gratitude thing, right? It's like taking a chance to be thankful and be grateful for that. One, you're able to do it, and two, you got it done. And like that, you like, committed yourself that day. I think people forget how important that is. Even like
Hmm.
starting, like we've talked about that before. I think like with starting like exercising and stuff, like just putting in anything and doing it, and then, really taking a moment to be like, hey, I did that, is very helpful because it can keep you motivated and keep you sort of going, especially when it gets hard. But I think
And
another
plus,
difficult. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
these three things are things that I know that if I do these uh consistently, it's going to benefit my life immensely. And they're things that like probably I won't see the difference from day to day, but I know that just getting it done over time, next year I'll be better, 5 years I'll be fantastic, 10 years I'm going to be world class. So it's those types of things that doing it regularly is going to be helpful.
Oh, yeah. It pays off like crazy. But they're also the hard ones sometimes to keep doing, especially when you hit those roadblocks, right? Because they're like, because the incremental growth is so small sometimes on a daily, looking at it from day to day, that it's like, it's hard to even see why you're still doing it sometimes. It's like, God damn, like, ugh, it gets really
Mm-hmm.
challenging. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like I think we forget that too. Like anything, any valuable skill and stuff takes like a lifetime to develop really and become a master at, and then, but the longer you do it, the better you get and the faster you are at doing it. And so it just kind of becomes part of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I think it's crucial that we keep learning and we keep doing things. But yeah, enough is a tough one. I think it's a very hard thing to determine. And maybe like looking at it from day to day, giving yourself a chance to, and when you have moments, I think it is important. I think when you have moments where you do have those moments where you're like totally stressed out or totally pushing yourself way too far, to take a step back for a day. Know that you
Mm-hmm.
can go back to your routine the next day. It's not impossible. If you've been doing
Mm-hmm.
it for a while, it should be relatively easy. But give yourself a break because sometimes you just need a break. Or you might not be feeling well, or something else might be going on that's really, I notice that with myself a lot when I have other things going on, especially like things that are bothering me, like making me upset or something, that can really impact the point at which I get stressed out and the point at which I start to get worried about things or lose my momentum. And sometimes just identifying that too, and then taking time is very helpful to keep on track.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, I think that's pretty good. Anything else you
Yeah,
wanted to add?
I think that's enough.
Yeah, I think that's enough too. That was
There you
good.
go.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode of the Existential Stoic podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you this week. Make sure to listen to us both on the podcast and also on YouTube. You can find us there as well. And like, subscribe, share. We will see you midweek with a quick fix. And lastly, I'm Randy. That's my buddy Danny. Later, Danny.
Later, Andy.